ambassador, leader, Darik, Alexander.
Dirty bit. I came up in here to rock, light a fire, make it hot. I don't wanna take no pictures, I just wanna.
Well, it's nice when it gets darker because I can only see like the first 1,000 of you, so that's kind of refreshing. Yeah, BK was talking about the rap really quick. If you guys are on my team and you're a monster, what I want to do is, you know, we kind of make these noises sometimes, little ah. So if you think you're a monster in the business, what that basically means is you're ready to work. You're ready to grind. You're ready to take the fate of your future and put it on no one else but yourself. And so, you know, I'm not going to go to each side, but if you think you're a monster in this business, I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3. And on 3, I just want to hear a big old ah. All right, so. Okay, that was awesome. Give yourself a round of applause. So, I know that I'm supposed to come up here. I'm supposed to share my story with you guys. But the truth of the matter is, if you really wanted to, you could go to YouTube. You know, you could go to Facebook. You could go to Google, and you could take a look at it. You can see my story. So what I'd really like to do is I'd like to share with you a story that you will not find on YouTube. You can't find it on Facebook, and you'll never find it on Google. And it's a story about a man my father knew named Bucky. And it stands for Buckminster Fuller. And you have to understand, my dad never met another human being like Bucky. But Bucky never slept. And, you know, there are rumors. And when you hear that, my father said, no, that's just not true, that people need sleep. No, the man literally could tap into his genius to such an extent where he did not sleep. And at the time, of course, they are just rumors. And so my father had just finished this business school in Lake Tahoe. And this man who was born in 1895, they had what's called the last week is the future of business. And the top leaders around the globe that were committed to changing the way we cooperated and operated in business with how we behave with each other, because it is business that runs the world, not governments. And they would all convene, and Buckminster Fuller was the leading speaker. And this 86-year-old man would speak for 9 to 10 hours a day. At the end of the entire thing, it would close, and all the students would go to bed exhausted. And my dad would go to his condo, and lo and behold, the condo across from him in the window was Bucky, and Bucky was just working all night. So my dad was getting ready for bed, and as he was getting to bed, he sees Bucky still working. And so he was intrigued, so he set an alarm on his clock every hour. And every hour, lo and behold, Bucky was still working. 9 o'clock comes around, he put a little water on his face, and he went back and taught for another 9 to 10 hours. The guy literally never slept. He had tapped in so much genius within himself, he could fuel his body nutritionally and not sleep. But that's not what my dad loved about Bucky. So on the final day of the Future of Business conference, Bucky brought everyone together. And someone raised their hand and they said, what do you attribute to your genius? What do you attribute to your success, to everything you've done in your life? And Bucky, this man at 86, he said, well, everything that you view as failures, I view as the building blocks of my success and why I'm here, which is to teach that we are to work in cooperation with one another. And it changes the way we view one another with our thoughts and our feelings and these paradigms that we shift, and originates from how we conduct business with one another in all aspects of life. And so when Bucky was young in the 1920s, he didn't see very well when he was a young boy, and he had really thick glasses. And he didn't hear too well either, so he was different. I want to see a show of hands if you feel like at any point in your life maybe you were different, right? And so in the 20s, the Fuller family, what they did was they'd save all their money, and they'd take the firstborn son and they'd pay for his schooling at Harvard. And so whenever one of the sons was ready to go to school, they'd take all their money and spend it and take their son to Harvard. Now, Bucky, when he's talking on the final day to my dad and these people, he said when it was time for him to go to Harvard, he viewed himself at the age of 18 as a rebel child, okay? And so when he went, he said within the first semester, he spent all of the money on wine, women, and partying. And the audience was floored. They had this guru image of the man. And so when they said that, within his first semester, he got kicked out of Harvard. And they were furious. So he worked for a year. And after that year, they saved up their money again, and they readmitted him back to Harvard. And I guess in the 20s, like the Ziegfeld Follies or something, but he spent all of his money within his first week again, wine, women, and partying. And he got kicked out within his second week of being at Harvard, the second time. And at this point, his family viewed him as a disgrace. They kicked him out of his home, and he moved to Canada, and he worked in the lumber mills for a long period of time. And his life changed when he met a woman named Anne, and it was the love of his life. And he got a daughter, he got a family, but it still didn't tame Bucky. And he just said, college is just too slow for me. And so he was at his house, and the Harvard-Yale game was coming up, and it was a very, very big game. And so he was getting ready to leave the game, and his 5-year-old daughter, who was pretty ill at the time, he went to his little girl and said, honey, is there anything Daddy can get you at the game to make you happy because you're not feeling well? And she said, yes, Daddy, will you please give me one of these little favors, one of these little canes that you can get at the game? He said, of course, baby, Dad will get you that. Kissed her on the forehead, and he left for the game for one night. That was the plan. He partied for 3 nights in a row and didn't come home, getting incredibly intoxicated. And on the morning of the 3rd day, the family wondering where he was, a friend finally found him and said, you need to get home. Your daughter is deathly ill. And so he rushed home, charged into the door of his house, went upstairs, picked up his baby girl and held her in his arms and said, honey, are you okay? And she opened her eyes, looked at her father and said, Daddy, did you get me my cane? And of course, he forgot. And he said, no, honey, Daddy forgot. And she looked up at him, closed her eyes, rested her head on his chest, and died in his arms. So at that moment, Bucky decided to kill himself. He decided to commit suicide. And you have to understand, my father and no one knew this about Bucky. They didn't know this about this 86-year-old guy. So he laid his daughter down. He kissed his wife on the forehead, and he was walking to the pier, and he was going to jump in and kill himself. And as he was walking to the pier, taking each step, he said he got to the edge, he looked at his feet, and he felt as though they were elevated 5 inches off the ground. And he heard a voice say to him that you do not have the right to take your own life. You do not have the right to do that because you are a child of the universe, and you are meant to serve these people, and taking that life will be a disservice to others. And that is not why you're here. You're here to teach people to cooperate by originating the thought patterns you have with each person and really look at the way you think. So the first thing he did, he didn't commit suicide. He made a 2-year vow of silence. And if you knew Bucky like my dad, the guy was just a talker. And he said, every problem that originated in my life stemmed from the manner in which I communicated with people, as well as my perception of these people that originated in my mind. And if I'm going to speak, any word I speak will be a word with passion, with conviction, and it'll be a word that can make change, not by just building the man, but by building the environment and the man that is around him. And he dedicated the rest of his life to making a difference in the world. So when he finished this story, everyone was just in tears. And he sat there really humbled, and finally someone raised their hand. They said, is there anything at all that you're scared of? And he said, well, I don't have fear in the physical, mental, or emotional sense, but there's certain things in my life I would rather not have to experience. And the main thing is spending any time in my life without her. And his wife, Ann, was in the back. And she stood up, and she's like this tall. And she said, well, Mr. Fuller, that's good, because I don't want to spend a second of my life without you in it. And everyone chuckled, and that's how they ended the session, The Future of Business. So 5 years later, my dad gets a call from a close friend that was at that same seminar with him. And he said, Bucky's wife, Ann, is in a coma. She's really sick. She's deathly ill. So Bucky charged to Colorado, marched into the hospital, went upstairs, sat down with his wife, laid his head on her chest, closed his eyes, and in the middle of the night, he got a stroke and he died. That morning, she passed away when she was in a coma. Neither one of them had to ever experience their biggest fear. They got what they wanted. They never had to spend a minute without each other in their life. That's Buckminster Fuller. That's the man that changed the way my father perceived not just the world, but the way we operate with each other. And that's the man that changed the way I view people. And so I've been spending a lot of time, because the theme's revolution, trying to think about what I can do in terms of revolution. The one thing I really think about is when you look at revolution, at least in the United States, you know, in like the 1700s, we had a violent war against the British, right, for our children. Some of these children weren't even born yet, right? So we fought for this revolution, and we got our independence and our freedom for our children weren't born. Once we achieved that, then what do? We had another war, a civil war, and we fought again for our independence and freedom for our children that weren't born. And then World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam, Desert Storm, and now we're still fighting again. So what I think is maybe our generation can have a financial revolution. Maybe our generation can tap in to that inner genius by not having a fallback plan, but like Buckminster Fuller, fall forward quickly. And maybe we can be a generation that understands that, like Bob Proctor said, education stems from the root word educo, which means to invoke from within and become aware of yourself. And we can unlock our inner genius just like Buckminster Fuller did, become aware of it, and maybe our generation can have a young people revolution. Thank you.